Good morning or afternoon or evening, depending on where you might be. I'm Eric Schumacher Rasmussen. I'm the editor and VP of Streaming Media and the conference chair for Streaming Media West Connect. This is session 3 of day 3 of our 6th virtual streaming media event. And in previous events, I've always said, we'll see you in person next time. I'm not going to jinx it by saying that this time. But we are planning Streaming Media East to be in person in Boston, May 24th and 25th of 2022. And we will have another Streaming Media virtual event, Streaming Media Connect February in February, big surprise. So we hope you can join those. Look for more information forthcoming on that soon. Just a couple of housekeeping notes before we jump in. If you have questions for our panel, please put them in the Q&A rather than the chat. That just makes it easier for our moderator to keep track of questions coming in. Live transcripts are turned on. If you want to turn them off, you can go to the bottom of your screen and press live transcript and then disable transcript or disable subtitles. I forget the exact wording. And just for being here, you are entered in a drawing to win a $50 Amazon gift card, but you got to stick around till the end. So we will announce the winner of the gift card after the panel. With that, I'd like to thank all of our diamond sponsors for the entire week of Streaming Media West: Conviva, Limelight Network, Signient, and Video Guys. And we have video messages from each of them. And so, Mike, you can roll the diamond sponsor videos.
VideoGuys.com is your source for the LiveU Solo, and our Black Friday special starts now.
Stream from anywhere, anytime with the LiveU Solo and Solo Connect bundle. Buy now with the 2 or 3 modem kit and get 1 month Solo Connect free. This includes unlimited data and LRT Cloud and is only available until November 30th, 2021.
Go to VideoGuys.com or call us at 800-323-2325 to take advantage of LiveU's Black Friday special today.
In this era of streaming video, we are pioneers, helping make your stories more vibrant. Conviva lives in billions of apps on devices all over the world, measuring trillions of data points each day to provide real-time insights for your content, ads, and social. Conviva. Every stream, every screen, every second.
And I would also like to thank the sponsor of this panel, Live Switch. And Live Switch's Jared Venema will be joining the discussion. But first, let me welcome the moderator, Jason Tebow, the Executive Director of the Streaming Video Alliance. JT, how are you?
I'm doing great, Eric. Thanks for the introduction. It's exciting to be back at Streaming Media West, although I was really looking forward to Huntington Beach.
You and me both, brother. We've got to stop meeting like this. Maybe we'll meet again soon.
Exactly. All right, so let's do a little bit of housekeeping first. Obviously, the webinar is being recorded. This panel is being recorded, so that'll be great if you can pass it along to colleagues and friends who might want to view it, if you haven't had time to come and join. We have 3 awesome panelists, so if I can have those panelists join, that would be great. Just to do some brief introductions to myself, as Eric said, I'm the Executive Director of the Streaming Video Alliance. We're a global technology association, so similar to SMPTE or IETF or CTA. We bring member companies from across the ecosystem together in a collaborative environment to develop solutions for really challenging, critical problems with delivering high quality video experiences at scale. So if you're interested, just go to the website at streamingvideoalliance.org and lots of stuff to download and read there. All right, so let's do some introductions with our panelists, 3 really amazing panelists to talk about low latency. So let's start off with Jared.
Yeah, good afternoon, good morning, good evening. My name is Jared. I'm the CEO and founder of LiveSwitch. We've been around for, I guess, 13 years-ish now, 13, 14 years, something like that. We've been doing real-time communication forever, since our foundation, and more into the video streaming over the last 6-7 years now. Obviously, last year was quite a fantastic challenge with all of the things happening there, but we were able to pull together some fantastic large-scale, low-latency streaming solutions over the last little while, and it's been quite a ride. Pulling some unique solutions together. I hope we get the opportunity to review a few of those today.
Ah, fantastic. All right. Well, thanks, Darcy.
Good morning and good afternoon. It's Darcy Lorincz. I'm currently the CTO for Barret-Jackson. And I've been doing this thing called streaming since probably before it was called streaming. So I might be the old guy in the room. Early days at Digital Island, and many things we did at their early days at Origin Digital, Accenture, last 23 years, I guess. So look forward to the conversation today and hopefully taking some of that experience and passing it off to the crowd.
Absolutely. And you do work at a really cool company, I got to say. Been there a couple times.
Gotta love cars.
Not a car, but it's awesome. And last but not least, we have Adam.
Hi, everyone. I'm Adam Michalak. I'm one of the principals at Hollywood Scoring. Hollywood Scoring is a music production company. We focus on music production for film, television, and video games, as well as live esports broadcasts. And some projects I've been working on include recording the music to the score of the Venom sequel and mixing the music to the forthcoming League of Legends Netflix show Arcane. So I will present more of a sort of an end user side to this equation here.
No, it's really cool, and I'll geek out. Yeah, you're working on cool projects. I don't think we give honestly, enough airspace to sound as it relates to streaming. I think we largely focus on video and the pixels that are being shown on the screen, but sound, yeah, obviously sound is a huge part of the watching experience. Anyway, just my 2 cents. All right, well, let's get into some questions. So I think the first is that, hey, listen, I've been in the industry for a long time. I'm confused sometimes by these terms. We've got low latency, ultra low latency, near real-time streaming, lower latency, super low latency, kind of low latency. Like, there's just so many terms out here, and I don't think people really understand what the difference is. So maybe Jared, maybe you can start us out with this. Why do we have all the terms?
Yeah, it's fascinating because low latency means something different to everybody, right? We run into this all the time because we deal with pretty much strictly real time, like 200 milliseconds and lower. So people come and talk to us and they say, "Oh, you guys do low latency streaming." I'm like, well, maybe. What do you mean by that? Do you really need like sub-second, or are you trying to do a 30-second delayed feed? I think a lot of it just comes from history. Just as things have gotten lower and lower, they said, "Oh, well, this is low latency now," and 30 seconds, and now it's 10 seconds, and it's 5 seconds. It's like, "Oh, wow, this is ultra low because it's 5 seconds now." We try and use real time as the term to differentiate the things that are seconds versus sub-second. But I'm sure at some point that's gonna there's gonna be why is it more than 10 milliseconds, right? There's gonna be another one.
Always something lower.
Yeah.
Darcy, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, obviously coming from a place that does auctions online as part of your business model, you can't have latency. How do you guys view these different terms?
Yeah, we have all the above. So I think if I walked around the office, I get all those terms in some way. And that, part of the evolution of everything is standards and practices, and hopefully something comes up in this space. But until that magic day, we still have to deal with many of these terms. For us, they're all there. If it's the auction feed, has to be real time. It's too late 5 seconds after the close of the bid. So that is ultra low latency. When we're doing fantasy bidding, can have a little bit more tolerance because you kind of close the window before the car crosses the block. But it still has to, before you close, you've got to give people a fair chance, and everybody has to be at the same frame and the same time. So that's a little more tolerant to, what I'll call delay, but during the time of the bidding, it has to happen, for everybody at the same time, low latency. Synchronization's really important for both those experiences. And then we have, our stream that goes on to broadcast, and that just, I feel like that's so low hanging fruit these days to, have a few seconds to do something on streaming.
That's lovely, right?
It's awesome. It's a lifetime. So
I got 2 seconds. Oh my gosh.
Nobody's sweating it when you have a couple seconds anymore. Back when, when we're doing streaming in the early days, those seconds were precious, but today it seems like table stakes. And then we just have everything BOD, which nobody cares about on this conversation.
Yep, exactly.
So we have at least 4 scenarios in the business. We have at least 4 different, infrastructures. I'll say, of course, they all leverage different parts of things, but you tune that encoder for one, it doesn't work for the other. So there's lots of mixes and matches and switches that go on. And you said earlier, and then you have audio. And then you have crowd noise, and then you have data, and then you have all these other things that overlay the video experience and or synchronize with it like audio. So it's not easy when you have 4 things you got to worry about, but we seem to pull it off every time there's a major auction, and it feels good to be done with those major events. I just got my hair done, so I don't have all the white hair that I used to have.
Adam, what are your thoughts on latency? Obviously doing music scoring, and then, sure, you can stream music as well, but do you guys do you suffer from the same identity crisis of low latency terms as the video streamers do?
So where our concerns came in, certainly exploded during COVID, doing collaborative near real-time production. With the recording studio and the producers and people listening from afar, and this was indicative of the whole production industry of creating an opportunity where people weren't waiting seconds to give feedback, waiting for the audio or video to arrive and then waiting for the comments round trip. That it became pretty intolerable pretty quickly, like waiting 2.5 seconds. It just the communication starts breaking down very quickly. So there's a few big software solutions out there now that that are off the shelf. But yeah, we were looking at sub-second became ideal. Basically, it became more than tolerable. It became a happy collaboration. So that's kind of where we're sitting right now.
No, that's a very. Sorry. Go ahead, Jared.
The thing that I found, the reason that real time, like we've all just kind of touched around it, but the reason that real time part is necessary is whenever there's a bi-directional communication, right? Anytime there's anything that has to go 2 ways, it's got to be down in the milliseconds range. Yeah, it has to be. There's just no way around it. We did the WWE Thunderdome, right? That whole experience. You got to bring thousands of fans into the stadium. Well, if there's a wrestler does a giant slam or whatever the heck it is, right? You can't have a crowd react 2 seconds later.
Oh no!
It's just.
Well, and think about like traditional broadcasts, right? How many times have we experienced where you're watching somebody at the newsroom talk to somebody remote, and they ask a question, and then there's a pause of like 2 seconds.
There's this.
Yeah, and finally the person goes, "Yes, that's an excellent question," and it's so disconcerting. You're like,
it's obnoxious. Yeah. Well, and it doesn't even have to be audio video. One of the things that auctions is a good example where there's some sort of interaction there. A friend of mine gave me another example. He got really frustrated because he was watching a football game and he was getting Twitter updates faster than he was getting the broadcast.
Yep.
So he was getting the Twitter feed was interrupting his broadcast experience because he knew what was going to happen 20 seconds.
Which becomes more of an issue when you start having video married with social experiences, so that you can have kind of like the whole watch together community. Yep. If anybody's unsynchronized in any channel, yeah,
it blows up. The experience falls apart. Yeah.
Yep.
There's no way around it. Yeah. If you can embed the audio or chat or other things in your experience, then at least you can avoid it. But people have more than one device, so that's kind of back to the network. Can it deliver a synchronized experience across devices? That's a whole other area of concern.
Yeah. So, and Darcy, maybe you can answer this next question for us. So you mentioned this kind of like, encoder parts and this part and that part, where from your standpoint does, a lot of the latency in the workflow come from? What affects it the most?
Everything. And then I'll start with first mile always, unfortunately, there's some connection that you have, and it actually starts before that at the camera. I mean, we have 60 cameras now that are lined up to, they all have to be synchronized. So before you even get going, you've got to make sure everything is wired properly. And then you have to worry about the first mile. So, hopefully your provider is going to be there for you, and they've got some chops, but usually we just tunnel through it and don't worry about them anymore. It's kind of, we want to erase that first and last mile by just using a dump pipe, honestly. And then hit the network as fast as possible where you can distribute. And hopefully you've got a good partner on the CDN side, or multiple partners, which we should all have for different purposes, or just overload. And most of them have stepped up. If you drop the packets or mess up, somebody's live event, your business won't be around for the next event. It's it's brutal truth, and there are choices these days. So I would say first and last mile is still the issue for most, and how you set up your production. And then this new thing called cloud production. That's a place where we've seen a lot of challenges for ourselves when we had to do things during the pandemic that we never experienced before. And so those are still challenging, figuring out how to fit them into a real-time or low latency workflow, because you have to make calls to a cloud to do a switch. So we want to embrace them, and we are in some of the workflows, but still have the good old master control sitting there with physical hardware, because the show must go on.
Yeah, we could do a whole day talking about remote production. Adam, what about you guys? You talked about sort of that collaboration experience. Where did you find in that process latency really happening? Was it at the player side, the client? Was it in between?
So we went through a couple iterations. Our current iteration is we actually are using two services, one just for high quality audio, and we've disconnected video from the audio because the other issue we were facing was an occasional dropout. Things that might be tolerable in most situations, but if someone's critically listening to audio and there happens to be a dropped packet that appears as a mute because of something video related, that got super frustrating for people really quickly. So I mean, there's tons of, talking about lining up 50 cameras, you have all these great cameras and you have to delay them all to the RF Steadicam, which is, the slowest guy in the crew. We in our studio, we certainly end up like aligning things, with our broadcast software, and that's just good housekeeping. But from there, we went through some iterations with different services. Basically, we had to chunk through these different things before we arrived at a solution that got us to that sub-second place.
Yeah, it's interesting. Actually, I would say that that's sort of your first bullet point, audience, on what you can learn from this panel with live streaming and low latency, is that you're going to have to. It's trial and error and optimization, figuring out what pieces work best, how to fit them together best, and then tuning them to work properly together. That's an important thing. There is no like, I just need a solution that works for every single use case that I have out there. Probably not going to find that. It's really, really difficult to do that. And that actually, that kind of leads me into the next question, which, maybe Jared, you can answer this for us. But, is low latency always a top priority for ensuring
Absolutely
a
high
not.
quality of experience?
Yeah.
Absolutely not. But it very much depends on what you're trying to do. That ties in with my comment from before, which is the moment you're going bidirectional, yes, right? If there's some sort of an interaction, bidirectional, and I don't mean just bidirectional audio and video, I mean bidirectional communication of some sort. We've got one customer, for example, that I can't go into the name. They're doing a remote feed. Their interactions are all just triggering events in that remote system, right? They're interacting remotely with that system. They're watching it live though. And there's other folks that are in that other system receiving those events. So there's a bidirectional communication. It's not audio video. They're not sending their feed in two directions or anything. Like it's not like what we're doing here. But there is an interaction that's taking place, and that, if that doesn't happen in real time, the experience is terrible, right? Like it just suffers. When it's a one-way experience, yeah, then you don't care, right? If it's a one-way feed, whatever, right? But I think those are becoming less common because of the social aspect, right? Like my example of Twitter a minute ago, right? That's a completely, sideband thing that's happening. So if you're experiencing something and there's any sort of sideband experience that can happen faster than what you're providing, you're going to get a disjointed experience out of it. So it is really important to understand not just your app, but other things that are happening around it, or your deployment or your production or whatever it is, right? There's things that happen in sideband channels that can impact that real-time aspect necessity as well. So I would say there's absolutely times when it's not. I mean, if you're just watching a pre-recorded video, like great, watch it on your own time. Who cares, right? It's completely irrelevant. But anytime there's an interaction where you're trying to see something that's happening in the real world, there's some sort of interactive component. All of the AR and VR stuff that's really kicking off. Everybody saw Facebook's announcement recently, right? It's all interactive, And the moment you got that, then you need super low latency.
So Darcy, you touched upon this in the first comment, really talking about the different types of video and experiences that you deliver to your end users, from VOD to auctions to fantasy auctions. Do those impact the way that you guys select technology? As you're looking at your workflows and trying to optimize, let's say, to make sure that your auctions are real time. What is the thought process you guys go through in terms of optimizing and selecting technology for those individual use cases to meet your latency requirements?
Well, it's actually pretty simple. We make everything go to the lowest latency, and then we start scaling back, because obviously more latency or less latency equals more cost. So then we look at the cost and say, does that workflow need to have that millisecond, or can it tolerate something else? We've actually started to look at machine learning for some of those workflows to understand what cameras and what networks and what resources are in play for certain types of, whatever it is. We now have AR and VR experiences that are being incorporated. So those are bringing a whole new challenge. Web AR especially, it's, overlaying things that aren't in the space from somewhere out in the web. So, we just say, let's just see if everything can fit into the lowest latency scenario, and then start taking it out from there. And we, some of it's purposeful because it doesn't need it and doesn't need the higher cost or, that performance. And some of it just doesn't ever meet the, requirements and has to drop off the table. Sometimes we just drop it. We move around, so there's locations that we go to, some that are awesome with their connectivity and some that aren't. And that's the first and last mile again. So that's kind of the outbound. On site, we're self-contained. We roll the entire everything everywhere. So it's all pre-configured. We don't worry about it. We test everything, get to site. But when you get on site, it's usually all bets are off. So you gotta look at those things. And that's where the machine learning comes in. It says, oh, this didn't meet your rule for that latency. So what are you going to do about it? When we're setting up, and sometimes you can do something about it, and sometimes you just have to drop it to another level of latency. So it's getting better because machines are there and they can help you, and you don't need a whole bunch of people running around, trying to plug things in for different scenarios. It's really common infrastructure, find the lowest common denominator, and that's where we kind of set our baseline.
That's interesting. Adam, what are your thoughts on that?
I think relative to what we're doing here with our music production, it doesn't apply so much. Maybe more of like looking at the esports stuff, which is on a much bigger scale. The esports stuff specifically is stuff with Riot Games. Those are global events that get pushed to tens of millions of people, possibly.
Yes. Concurrent. Yep.
Sure. There's the whole aspect of the video production side. And again, none of this stuff makes its way to terrestrial broadcast. It's all streaming. And then, gets into places in China, which aren't on YouTube. So traversing all sorts of different networks in that respect. But from their perspective, again, since it's not interactive, it's running at a huge scale, but they're not necessarily concerned about running so low. They're just pushing to tons of places at that point.
I don't know. That's a good call. Jared, thoughts?
No, I was just thinking, it's that same, you've got 2 seconds. Holy crap. What am I going to do with all this time?
And I want to, again, I'm going to call this out for the audience. This is point number 2. Darcy brought up, like, you need to evaluate the costs of squeezing latency out. So if you're talking about moving from 2 seconds to 1.9 seconds, and it's going to cost you $1 million, is it worth it? Or is moving from 10 seconds to 5 seconds going to cost you 20 grand? Is that worth it? So it's really examining the costs of the latency you want to reach versus the value that you're going to get from it. And that's really, I think, really comes into play when you start talking about sub-second. The human eye blink is 200 milliseconds. So if you're talking about, driving latency down even lower than that, you got to start asking yourself, what do we get out of this? Especially if it costs a lot of money. So just that's point number 2, audience. Cost is an important aspect of deciding on latency optimizations. Jared, I actually do want to turn to you because there is one thing about low latency and live streaming, I think, that is probably pretty crazy right now, and that's protocols. It is it is worse than VHS and Betamax. Yes, I just dated myself. But it's just like there are so many protocols. A new one came out recently, right? HESP from Thibeault, Thibeault player. So there's just so many of them out here. Like, where do we stand with things right now? Is there one that people can count on for most of the use cases, or do you really need like a bunch of different protocols to meet a bunch of different use cases?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, when it comes down to the, ideal, I spend my life in the sub-second world, right? In the 200 millisecond, 100 millisecond, 300 millisecond kind of range. In that world, right now, anyway, WebRTC is king, right? That's just the protocol of choice. And, that's where we live. And everything else is about, how do you bridge into that? Especially since with the big backing of, we got Google and Mozilla and Apple and Microsoft all basically saying, look, we're supporting this as an out-of-the-box standard on all these browsers. That does lend itself to, it getting a lot of adoption. I think it's going to be interesting. We provide SDKs for some of the AR, VR. That's an area that I don't think really has solidified yet. That is going to, there could be some other protocol or something like that for that world. We've got WebRTC working in there. That doesn't mean that there's not something that comes along that's more suited or better suited or differently suited to it. So that'll be an interesting one to watch. A lot of the other ones I look at as more suited to the kind of the one-way, the non-interactive streaming, just from an adoption standpoint. Anyway.
I have a little contribution there. I put my board hat on for a company I'm on called Wtfast. They went completely to the extreme and don't use anything standard. They just developed their own overlay network and protocol for gamers because gaming you couldn't fix it. And gamers are brutal if you drop packets or provide lag. So, they have, I don't know, it's a software defined network, 350 nodes around the world. And if you play the games on that network, you're going to be guaranteed a better experience. And they didn't worry about trying to figure out all the other things you needed to cobble together. You just have a client that gets downloaded, hooks the session for the game you're playing, which they support, 1,400 games. That's the biggest part of the business is trying to figure out how to make the games optimized. And that gets deeper than the network. So there's nothing out there, at least that I've seen. There's a few companies like Wtfast that are doing this, and I think the overlay networks, serve a purpose there. They may be using all those protocols, by the way, but they just hand you off a pipe and say, tell me the 3, 4, 5 scenarios you have, and thank you very much. So I like that. I like the overlay network scenarios as well.
And they have a proprietary client. Sorry, Adam.
Yes.
No worries.
Yeah, they have their own routing technology. They have their own routing technology. They don't even use standard routing. They just overlay everything. Move packets for gamers during the live sessions.
Adam.
Well, interestingly enough, when we were sort of developing our, working on our early streaming to clients, and this starts to fall into some audiophile stuff. We started doing listening tests of basically Opus versus AAC. And we certainly, for us, WebRTC tends to be the most reliable, fastest protocol that we landed on. But at one point, we were sort of fighting the stereo audio quality of Opus's bitrate versus a commiserate setup with AAC, and found we had to crank Opus up to like 384 to kind of give us what we thought at stereo, to give us what AAC was at 256. And again, we're in the weeds here. Like we're concerned that our clients are experiencing something like being in the studio, basically, to give them that comfort. And initially, when we were dealing with WebRTC streaming, we found that only Firefox initially supported stereo. The other browsers were crashing it down to mono. So a lot of that's been fixed, but again, there's just some interesting weirdness with some of those protocols and codecs.
Well, and that goes to Darcy's point, like the company he described, like, it's chicken and egg, right? So you want to do an overlay network, but in order to get all the users, you got to give them a client. Okay, so now you have the users all have to download a client, but you give them a client and they have a better experience than they would on some other solution. It's just, I mean, I've seen this a lot in the industry. I've seen proprietary clients come out, so like HESP. So this new protocol is really focused on channel switching. From my perspective, what I see is that it works really well, but it provides ultra fast channel switching. So it's great for the fast companies, right? Anybody offering a linear live streaming broadcast experience, OTT, can, channel switching, like it has to operate the same as we're used to on broadcast. So HESP came to sort of solve that, but you need something in the player, right? It's not sort of a native, like, let's just make it work with everything that we have.
I think fundamentally, if there's something that requires everybody else to update something, I mean, you could do it, but man, it's a hinder adoption.
Well, but to Darcy's point, it's gaming, right? It's a specific use case. So the question then becomes, for live streaming, can we require different clients for end users for different use cases? So we could say, like, so like, okay, play, if you want to watch our videos on VOD, like, you're just going to download wherever you want to watch it, here's the player for you. But if you want to do interactive, right, or you want to do like AR or VR in your Oculus 2 or even on a browser, you got to download this other client. Is that an option for people, you think?
It comes to, we talked about cost a bit. This is value. A gamer that's going to reduce lag by X is going to win more tournaments, more matches, going to download it. They're going to take the effort. Is that going to happen at the consumer level when you're watching a sporting event or an esports event? Maybe not. Maybe, you don't care. You're not going to take that extra step. But when you're playing a game, all bets are off if your lag is worse than somebody else. You're dead. You're dead up behind the counter. Your car crashes into the side of the.
Totally depends on your customer. Totally depends on your customer, right? Yeah. Like we do. An interesting thing that happened over last year is we had a lot of customers that were in the telehealth space switch over to our platform because simply for one reason, which was no download, right? That was they had an app and they were trying to get it to consumers to do remote telehealth, right? And consumers couldn't get the download. Like they'd forgotten their, whatever app store password, or they couldn't get download working on their phone or whatever it was. The ability to go click and you're in was fundamentally critical to the whole workflow, right? So for those kind of users, download fundamental blocker versus a gamer who's saying a download is absolutely something they would do, right? So it's 100% an audience question at that point.
By the way, just one more point on that. So there's still friction there, so that company's moving everything to the chip level at the CPE, talking to the people who make the modems and the cable modems and the Wi-Fi access points. That's the next move, because there's still friction, and that just makes it ubiquitous. You get your thing from your network operator. It's already embedded. You don't even think about it.
Well, we've seen Intel go that route, right? So we've seen them incorporate, call it video rendering optimizations at the chip level. We've seen companies start to explore FPGAs. Like I definitely think if you're going to do something for a specific user, that makes cost sense, going to the silicon level is probably the way to go. It's overlaying software on it is always going to be a problem.
3 billion gamers is a good reason to,
just
put some time into it.
Little tiny reason. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a big enough TAM. I mean, it's just me talking, but that that brings up this next question, and I'm not going to dog on any protocol, but when we talk about live streaming, we have to consider scale, right? And so WebRTC is great. WebSockets are fantastic, right? So there are ways to increase and provide streaming at ultra low latencies again. So let's say ultra low is below a second. So talking like getting down to the 500 milliseconds to 200 milliseconds. But the issue is of scale, right? So WebRTC does not scale well for video delivery. It scales fine for chat, which is where it originated with obviously with Riot Games and the gaming folks, but it doesn't scale really well in terms of like all of a sudden, what if we had 4 million concurrent users watching the Super Bowl at 4K on it? So Jared, I know that you guys are bigger WebRTC guys. So how do you address the scale part of live streaming, at low latency?
We've got that. That's an internal solved problem.
So,
we do very large scale.
Yeah. No, I mean, but it brings up the issue also of all the other protocols, right? Of any protocol that's being used is how do you deal with scaling issues? Is it just cloud resources? Is it just spinning up new resources? Is it capacity planning? Like what really is the solution for
I think it's a little bit of like kind of all of the above. So, a lot of times it is more infrastructure or global infrastructure, changing your ingestion places, having some distributed, a redistribution and saying, okay, 200 milliseconds here, but we're okay with 250 milliseconds, still dealing with a little bit of additional latency to rebroadcast it out to cascaded servers. Capacity planning does come into it though. Like you want to be able to at least have a little bit of predictive, okay, we expect that, 10,000 people are going to show up for this event versus 100,000 people, right? Like if you're going to have 100,000 people, you may want to have a little bit of extra capacity lying around so you can deal with that influx.
A little planning.
Yeah. Although honestly, the biggest challenge tends to be around, that initial shock point. If you have a hard start, what we did find that was fascinating is when we started doing some very large scale things, rarely was there a hard cut. Like it would slowly ramp up and then slowly ramp down. You'd have a large number, but it was rarely like, hey, 10,000 people showed up at the same time. And then, it was on us at a software level to say, okay, how do you pre-allocate resources so that if 10,000 people do show up, WebRTC has a whole signaling protocol that they've excluded, right? How do you make sure that signaling can take place with 10,000 people, right? And broadcast those events out to 100,000 or whatever the number might be. So, it tends to be definitely some capacity planning, certainly at the implementation level, the software level itself, how you signal out to that many people and make that kind of a feed available to them. There are definitely some interesting challenges around that, but some of it's software, some of it's capacity planning, some of it's just literally add more hardware.
So Adam, what are your thoughts on this in terms of, providing that, again, that bi-directional interactive production between studio and artist and whatnot? Do you guys see a scale problem with that, or how are you addressing it?
Well, I think luckily for us, the scale tends to be small, but then the issue is small scale at high resolution, high quality.
Right.
And so, we're playing with that slider basically, and now we're at the side where people are looking for it as high quality a connection and as low latency as possible. The lucky part is that it's small, but the challenging part is certainly the quality. One of the things we ended up, as I sort of previously touched on, we had to disconnect audio and video and
Yep.
use them and sort of downgrade our video transmission in favor of guaranteeing that the audio would stay at high quality. We ran into lots of problems when we muxed them together. So right now we're using, just talking about the off-the-shelf services that we're using, I don't know if, there's a product called CleanFeed, which is basically a WebRTC based stereo audio ingest that you can invite people to listen on, and it's super simple. It's browser based, and it works great. For all the video from the studio, which again, we were muxing it together for the times when we would have sync to picture, which looked super great. In this case, for just sort of video communication of here's the people, here's the client, there's the musicians, we're just using Google Meet. It's super fast, it's super reliable, and it's kind of lightweight. And you know, again, we also didn't want to have our clients download extra software. There is a really popular product right now called Audio Movers. Is the piece of software, and again, to transmit requires people to download extra software. So we've just kind of landed in this nice off-the-shelf space right now. But for us, it's always been about like trying to get really high quality going, and that's probably been the challenge.
No, and so that's a really good point you bring up, right? So scale we often think about is just, you know, how many concurrent users we can support, but it's how many concurrent users we can support at the bit rate that we want to deliver the experience to. So, you know, you could have 10 million people on the same boxes as, you know, at 1080 as 1 million people at 8K, right? So that's the trade-off. That's what I think, again, audience point number 3, when you're talking about scale, you've got to look at the balance between concurrency and bit rate. So something to keep in mind.
Yeah.
And I think it's even more challenging than that. It's that you're absolutely right. But the reality is, you know, when you've got people joining in from the public where you don't control everything, you have no clue what they're joining in with.
That's right. Yeah.
We've got everything from the guy sitting there with his, you know, giant Mac display at, you know, 40 inches or whatever, and a, you know, 10 gigabit downlink, to the guy who's, you know, out on 4G on his iPhone. You know, are we going to be able to deliver the same experience to those guys? Should we be even trying to deliver the same experience to those guys? And then how do you deal with the fact that now you've got one ingestion feed, and now you're splitting it and transcoding it and sending out to X amount of people and trying to still do all of that in 200 milliseconds, right? So there's definitely a lot of challenges there, not just from a technology standpoint, which obviously that's an area that we spend a lot of time on, but from a capacity planning, how do you plan for the public, quote unquote, who are going to have whatever they have, right? So it gets interesting in you know, from a resource planning perspective for sure, and a scaling perspective. How do you predict that? Okay, we're going to have an event that's going to have, you know, 1 million people show up at it. We expect X% of them to be of this type. The reality is that changes just based on what kind of event it is. Right?
Darcy, I need you to wear both hats. So the overlay network is interesting, right? But it seems like it would have an inherent scaling problem. The second thing is that obviously, you know, from a Barret-Jackson perspective, you guys are doing live auctions. Like, how do you plan for scale, for concurrency, and again for bitrate? Like, what are some of the machinations that you go through there, as well as for, you know, Wtfast?
Well, Wtfast will start. I mean, it's a limited number of people that are actually playing the game. So, you know, you don't have millions of people playing the game; you have millions watching. So it's split in half, the distribution. Okay. So that's not a problem. You know, there's not really a scale issue. I haven't seen a game yet that's got, you know, tens of thousands of players, but that, you know, there's probably some coming. That said, you know, on the event side, you know, we have not just the critical delivery issues, we have congestion inside, you know, right. 100, 200,000 people on site, them all sucking up your bandwidth and, you know, doing all crazy things. You have to do, just as Jared said, you have to do network planning. You have to throttle people. You know, it's unfortunate, but people just can't get to certain things. We don't allow a lot of things. We don't allow people to do live streaming and FaceTime and any of that. We'll block all that in our traffic modeling. So, you know, you just have to have control of your situation, and you have to actually do some soul searching on who your audience is, and do you care about somebody on an iPhone. We care about everybody, so we kind of let everybody access wherever. We do know generally what the shaping is, because from event to event or week to week, you see trends. So we don't really get surprised that all of a sudden everybody's mobile versus desktop. It's kind of a normal planning process. We do see those things. We adapt as fast as we can during that event and certainly between events. So yeah, there's really no perfect answer for it, but if you don't do planning and don't do network planning, and you don't have the ability to throttle, and you don't have the ability to monitor and manage your available bandwidth in and out, you got to start there. I think it's back to just basics, right? Building blocks from the on-site network to the distribution network to the master control, and making sure you have, I'll go back to machine learning. We're teaching machines to make decisions. So it's not just people's brains anymore trying to say, oh my God, because it's always reactive generally. Our knocks going, uh-oh, congestion over here, uh-oh, bad.
Let's fix it.
Customer service calls coming in, something's going on over there. Machines can learn very much quicker than we can once they know what those business rules are, and adapt that network to some extent without having humans have it push buttons and pull wires and things.
Are you guys making, a quick question, are you guys making business decisions based on the device itself? So for example, why would you send an ultra high resolution feed to a mobile phone when the user can't visibly see the difference between that and say like a couple bit rates lower?
Yeah, no, that's old school.
I just make sure, yeah.
That's definitely old school. If you can't detect the type of device that's connecting to you, that you got to go just back to basics. I mean, that stuff's been around for a while.
Well, no, I was more the question was, are you doing basically throttling? Are you forcing the bitrate ladder down a couple of shifts when the device really, it can support it, but it really makes no sense to waste the bandwidth sending that kind of resolution to that device?
Well, not just resolution, application. So if they're just watching, or if they're actually on fantasy bid, we know the application. The money for us, cost and revenue are way different when they're in their fantasy bid lane versus just another eyeball watching the event. So we do a lot of that analysis, and then again, those are the rules that are built into the machines to analyze. Okay. And if traffic starts moving really heavily into watching, and it's affecting the people that are bidding, which one are you going to choose? Sorry, viewers, you're going down to wherever we can take you, so the phones don't ring. So that's we do it all the time with completely adaptive infrastructure for all the workflows.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, we've got about 10 minutes left here, and I've got a couple of questions. And just to remind the audience, if you've got a question, drop it into the Q&A panel, please. But let's ask. So this one is about overlay networks. So obviously, Darcy, we'll have you answer first, and then Jared and Adam, please chime in with your thoughts on this. But the question is, for the example of Wtfast and overlay networks, what properties do you look for in the business requirements to get a sense of whether an overlay network solution is a viable path?
Cost performance. I have to repeat that, I guess, but that's kind of it. I mean, can you justify the overlay cost of the overlay network and the friction, because there is, on a download, or the time it takes to embed in the silicon, and it's just cost performance analysis. It's just the reality of it's just business, really. It's not even about the network. You have to always be looking at it. Now, I'll throw one thing out there: don't build your own, please. Like, find somebody who can help you, because if you start down that road, that's a slippery slope to try. And I know from experience, a lot of people just, I can build my overlay. I can just go and throw these colo locations up, and I'm fine. But then they realize they're actually a network operator. It's not in their business model to be a network operator, but they've gone that way.
That's for this whole industry. The number of times I've had customers that have been like, "Oh yeah, we're gonna roll our own global open source infrastructure." I'm like, "Yeah, okay."
Knock yourself out.
I've had more than one of them come back literally 2 years later and say, "Okay, yep, that was a screw up." So that's 2 years wasted down the drain. I don't know how many millions of dollars.
I had that conversation a lot. I mean, I came from Limelight Networks. That's a leased wavelength network, right? Their own digital optiplexing gear. I mean, they built a network, and if you want to sink in tens of millions of dollars, then it's something. Okay, I want to be a network operator. There are advantages, right? You can truly shape traffic down, of course, to the connection, the interconnection with the ISP, because unless you're the ISP, so unless you're a Comcast, right, where you have literally all the way down to the home gateway or the router, you still lose out on that ability. Like Darcy, you pointed this out at the last mile. It's kind of like tossing your, I can't do anything about that. I don't have control of it, and unless you're an ISP.
Since I joined the board of Wtfast, that they've gone to just away from direct to consumer and selling the whole bundle to the network operators. Let them worry about those phone calls and all that other stuff.
Pay someone else to do it for you.
We still have tens of thousands of consumers that use it for the advantage of winning a match or a tournament. But the general direction is, even for us, with all those overlay nodes, we don't want to be in the business. Customer service for for when you scale, you've got millions of customers. You don't want to be in the business of taking those phone calls. Billing too, lots. So you start thinking about the billing for the service and the customer service issues and all the compounding things, and you try and grow your own. It's a nightmare. That really would be a nightmare. All right. So another question we have is around. Somebody said, so when watching Thursday Night Football live on TV and watching Thursday Night Football on Twitch with some streamer that are being paid to watch and broadcast to their chat on Twitch, it is live time, and on TV it is a 20 to 30 second delay. So is the broadcast on Twitch ultra low on their feed?
Right. Yeah. Why is Twitch faster than the?
There you go. Thank you.
The TV.
I don't think. By the way, I don't think it's ultra low. I think it's a lot lower than a broadcast. But I'm pretty sure. I don't know this for a fact. Maybe what do you guys do? I thought Twitch was more like 10, 15 seconds. Yeah.
It depends if they're showing a live. They're doing an event in Las Vegas this week, and it's if they're doing a live event versus it just being somebody in their bedroom doing a stream.
Yep.
They'll apply more resources just like anybody else. But it's that's a great example of. Plus, it's a much better experience. You got overlays and you see data and AR, and they're still doing it faster than the broadcaster. I would tell you, broadcasters should wake up and try and catch up.
I think this brings up a really interesting point. Like for, a million years of my whole life, like you had cable television and had no reference and you had no idea how long it was taking that signal to hit your tube television. And now, hey, why does that guy know what happened on the game 10 seconds before me? He's looking at it on his computer. Why am I paying the cable company for this delay? What is going on here? Why is this cable company that's been around forever slower than this other technology? I thought that should be the fastest thing going. So, there's a whole new Pandora's box about to open.
As soon as the kid tells his parents there's a better experience on Twitch, the parents will be watching Twitch too.
They're canceling their cable bill.
Yeah, exactly. Those, like I said, broadcaster, wake up.
Well, and think about that, right? So as we're ending this up, it's becoming an interesting conversation about look what's happened and look where we are now. Like, how long were we talking ago? Maybe 3-4 years ago, it was all about cord cutting, cut your cord, and it was like, no, I can't get my live sports on streaming. And now where are we at? Now we are realistically at, why do I need cable? So I cut the cord, but of course the cable operators are all shifting business models from. I don't want to. Yeah, I'm not so much about broadcasting this over the coaxial anymore. I'm all about broadband. It's all about broadband. I can turn every one of those subscribers from a cable subscriber into a broadband plus subscriber, and I can meter them. So business models have changed. Like it's bedlam out in the market right now.
The thing that changed most, Jason, is rights. The rights have changed. Those guys are owned by, let's just say it, Amazon owns them. They have more money than God, so they can buy more rights than any of their broadcasters. That's right. As more eyeballs move there, their broadcasters can't afford the rights anymore, so it's just naturally going to go that way. They better wake up.
And the weird part, right? So advertising still, the majority is on traditional broadcast television. We know that's shifting, but it's very strange that it's been so slow to follow the amount of, or the momentum of streaming. So that'll be the next thing to really look at. Listen, I want to end on one really cool question. So you guys have all been in the industry for a while. You've seen some of those changes happen that we've talked about. Let's start off with Jared, then we'll go to Darcy, and then we'll end with Adam. But obviously the industry has learned some stuff about low latency because it's been a buzzword for a lot of years and a lot of experiments and a lot of technology. What is one thing that you think the industry has learned, like that has become maybe even a best practice today in terms of improving low latency with streaming experiences.
Best practice that the industry has learned in terms of low latency. I think the biggest thing that I'd say is happened, and I would say it's happened literally in the last year, is that a lot of the big behemoths have recognized, and I'm talking, the Microsofts and the Akamais and even Amazon a little bit, right? So they're a little maybe more advanced than some, but some of these larger organizations that have been doing some sort of streaming for a long time have kind of said, "Ooh, actually, there's something over here with this ultra low latency that has a inherently better experience, and we can provide that experience to our end users, and people are willing to pay." If you talk about like historically what normal low latency is, margins in that world are not big anymore, right? They're just not. But when you're creating an experience, creating that bi-directional part of it, all of a sudden people's willingness to pay goes up, right?
Yep.
And I think that's where there's been a bit of a wake up in the last year and a half, 2 years, where people are saying, "Ooh, actually, we can make a lot more money if we go down this path." Using our existing infrastructure, our existing, global deployments and everything for something bigger, and creating that experience for the user that they actually, there's money to be made.
Absolutely. Darcy.
Guess I'll repeat myself. Cost of performance. They've learned cost of performance. It's taken a while, some of them. Just because everybody else says low latency doesn't mean you have to deliver it. Is it important to your consumer? Is it important to your the sponsors, people pay the bills? Is it important for the application? Do your homework, do your cost benefit analysis, and usually tells you what you should be doing, and make your business fit. Don't just run at it. I mean, yes, experiment, but those experiments should be passed now. We're way too deep into this thing called low latency networks to be experimenting. Standards and practices need to emerge. I think we're learning. There's probably too many, but it's natural. It's happened in streaming so many times, so many cycles where everybody just comes up with their own thing because they think that they're going to win the race to the, somebody said beta VHS before. I mean, those races this industry is that on steroids all the time. Every cycle is craziness.
Yep.
Every cycle has craziness. Just go back to basic practice. Does it make sense to the money you spend for the return you're going to get? And the rest of it just kind of falls in place.
No, that's a great best practice. Adam.
I think the lower you go, the more difficult it is to go back the other direction. Just as the industry shifts overall, I mean, there are certainly cost will always be an issue. Hardware infrastructure will always be an issue. But as we create this interconnected, interactive world at lower latency, the assumption will be more and more that this is now, the benchmark, the baseline. And I think we're going to all find ourselves moving into this ultra, super, mega, opolis low world.
Yeah, I'm gonna harp on something Darcy said for a little bit. It's about standardization. So listen, our organization, our AR VR group is working on a POC in the Verizon labs to figure out how to optimize networks for streaming to VR headsets. So work's being done there. Papers will come out about that. And then our live streaming working group has actually produced a paper for best practices to reduce live streaming latency. And then they took it into the lab. So Liberty Global built us a lab. We're testing the assumptions there, optimizing, and then we'll come back with data and a revised paper. So Darcy, to your point, yes, the industry needs to come together so that we can all figure out how to do this better, because otherwise people are going to do whatever they can to make money. And that's fixing it how it needs to be fixed. So with that said, listen, guys, that was a great panel. Really cool discussion. Lots of great topics, lots of great advice for the attendees. So really appreciate that. I want to say thank you to everybody. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to Eric.
Thank you, JT. Thank you, gentlemen. That was a terrific discussion, and it's one that is ongoing. So I'm sure we'll be back at the next streaming media event talking about it again. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Conviva, Limelight Network, Signient, and Video Guys. And I'd like to thank Live Switch again for sponsoring and joining this panel. Our Amazon gift card winner is Amy Gillette. So Amy, keep your eye out on your email. for a note about that. Join us back in about 30 minutes where we talk about how true live programming fits in the OTT ecosystem. Thanks again. Mike, roll us out with a message from our sponsors.
Thanks all.
VideoGuys.com is your source for the LiveU Solo, and our Black Friday special starts now.
Stream from anywhere, anytime with the LiveU Solo and Solo Connect bundle. Buy now with the 2 or 3 modem kit and get 1 month Solo Connect free. This includes unlimited data and LRT Cloud and is only available until November 30th, 2021.
Go to VideoGuys.com or call us at 800-323-2325 to take advantage of LiveU's Black Friday special today.
In this era of streaming video, we are pioneers, helping make your stories more vibrant. Conviva lives in billions of apps on devices all over the world, measuring trillions of data points each day to provide real-time insights for your content, ads, and social. Conviva. Every stream, every screen, every second.